story of Upbuild began in a monastery. On our quest to understand ourselves more deeply, we recognize that it is our attachment to our egos, our identities, that gets in the way of being our true selves. This podcast will help you understand your ego. It will help you better understand your inner world, the motivations, insecurities, and emotions that affect your every action and relationship. Welcome to Upbuilding the Self.
Hey Vipin. Hi everyone. I'm Hari Prasad, and Vipin and I are here to speak about a reflection that he wrote called This Is Your Damn Life.
Thank you, Hari Prasad. It's good to be with you.
Great to be here. And I'm really excited because this reflection in particular, I was just rereading it. I've read it many times, but when I was rereading it, I was getting back in touch with the effect that it has on me that makes me really want to take my life even more seriously. I mean, I always want that spirit, and I'm excited to share that spirit with others, but you captured it so profoundly. And really, what is more important? I mean, Upbuild and my own spiritual journey began with this premise of how can we take our life more seriously? How can we realize the self and invest everything in the real self, leaving the ego behind? So I think this is really the crux of it, is developing that seriousness, that eagerness, and can't wait to discuss with you and share with everyone.
Thank you. Well, I would say that the intentionality with which you and Rasanath have lived your lives is what attracted me to Upbuild in the first place 10 years ago. And when I decided to join you, wanting that for myself, wanting to live my own life with that kind of intentionality. And then more specifically, you were one of the big inspirations for my writing of this reflection, because I see the way that not only you lead your life, but also how you approach coaching. And it really is an aspiration for me to approach the asymptote that you set for myself.
That's so touching. Really, thank you. It means a lot. And yeah, I don't know what I can say, but I'm grateful if it can set some kind of positive example.
You set many of those for many people, Hari Prasad.
Thank you. So sweet. So the expression, "This is your damn life," what does this mean?
There was one particular day where I had two separate coaching sessions with two founders of the same company. And then I also had a coaching session with you that same day. And I remember how much it struck me how differently people approach their coaching. And then how they approach their coaching being a metaphor for how they approach their life. If not even a metaphor, there's a direct relationship there. So that was a big part of the inspiration of just being able to reflect on how one approaches their life. And like you said earlier, the seriousness with which we take this opportunity that's been given to us. And then the title is a little bit playful for me. I smile when I think about it. This is your damn life. What are you doing about it? And we don't usually like to use that language in our work at Upbuild, but also there's a particular sort of emphasis that it just came naturally when I was thinking about it. I was just thinking, this is your damn life. This is your damn life. I was talking with Mary about this over dinner back in the fall, and we were just laughing and talking about all the ways in which we and people are not living their lives as if this is your damn life.
Is there anything else that you would share behind why you were inspired to write this?
I think people, when it comes to coaching, people are often trying to figure out what should they be doing. As recipients of coaching, it can be a bit of a black box, like, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to show up? And also in the world that we live in, feeling like I want to do a good job as a coachee. What does that look like? And part of the inspiration is also painting a portrait of what that can look like, what's possible if you take your coaching with that kind of intentionality and seriousness as I've seen in you and I've seen in others, and hopefully inspire people to do that. And the big thing is that, I use coaching as the sort of central frame of this reflection, but it's actually meant to go way beyond that. We're talking about how do you approach your coaching, but then I think by extension, how do we approach our lives? Whether we're getting coached or not, I think it's the same. With what level of intentionality, with what seriousness, how do we know what we actually need to work on, what we want to work on? How are we going about doing those things? I felt a fire underneath me about the importance of this, and I wanted to share that fire with others.
I love that spirit. I love that fire. So, what does it mean concretely to take your life seriously?
I think it means a lot of things. The first thing, it's about being clear about your values, your goals, your purpose. So starting from a place of what am I trying to do here with this life? What is it most important to me? And where am I heading? So it's hard to think about living an intentional life without having some clarity on what are the beacons. And so I think values provide a lot of that. And so in our coaching work, we do a lot of work on helping people really become clear on their values and which of those values are being honored and which ones are being stepped on. And how does one come into more alignment with those values? We're so good about establishing goals in the workplace. Well, I would say not always so good, but that's always an intention. And often when it comes to our personal lives, we just let those goals go by the wayside. We feel like that's appropriate for work, but I don't want to treat my personal life like work. That feels like I'm doing a job. But those goals are there. They're just maybe more implicit, and making them more explicit. And again, being clear on why those goals, what's important about them, and how am I actually progressing towards those. Part of what I wrote about in this reflection is knowing what is it that I want to work on at all times. And I think if you understand your values and you are clear about your goals, then you start to have more of a sense of what is it that, and then where are the gaps, where are the shortfalls against those goals? How do I start to become clear on what exactly do I want to work on? And how do I figure out how do I actually go about that?
Yes, yes. And it's even bigger than just your personal life, because your work life is in the context of your life at large, right? Your work is a part of your overarching life. So where are we going with this life period? It's not just like, well, I have my work life and my personal life, and I do it at work and I don't do it in my personal life, perhaps. But it's like, what is the overall trajectory of everything? That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, these aren't separate lives. One is a subset of the other. So how does my work make sense in the context of my overall life?
Mm-hmm. And now, if somebody is so clear that I want to make $1 million, and even I've smart goaled it, I have it's realistic, it's actionable, it's time bound, all of that stuff, is that taking your life seriously? Because I know what I want to work on. I've determined my values. Is that taking your life seriously?
When I think about taking your life seriously, it's about internal work that you're doing. And the goal that you shared, making $1 million, is really an external goal. So I might have goals of, I want this type of job, this title, this house. That's not really about working on myself. And when it comes to coaching, all of the work is really centered around how am I working on myself? And that's really inner work. There may still be an external goal that's part of the coaching process, but part of the work of coaching is to understand what work do I need to do on myself. And in the process, maybe that goal changes, or maybe it becomes a byproduct of some deeper work or goal that I might have.
That's so helpful. Thank you. Yeah. So what happens when people don't take their life seriously?
I think for many people, they're just reacting and responding to what is happening to them. And it's very easy also to start to feel like, well, life is happening to me and I'm sort of an actor in the play. I'm sort of bounced around and I'm just going with it, seeing what happens and hoping for the best. That's one piece of it. The other piece, it goes back to what we were just talking about, where I'm just focused entirely on the externals of my life versus the internals. And so I go about my life having focused and been fixated on all of the external manifestations of what it means to live a good life. And there's so much discovery of my inner world that I have left to, the wayside.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Ultimately, I don't actually discover who I am, but I live a life that's governed by the ego, which tells me who I think I should be. And then I evaluate myself accordingly. And whether I do well or whether I do poorly, it never satisfies because it's not really me. So it leaves me empty. Then I'm back to square one. If I even ever see that, which I think unfortunately most of us do not, which is why, again, so important. We want to wake up to the fact that it is possible to take our lives seriously, and that if we're not doing it yet, there is so much work to be done. And let us be eager.
It's so easy to take so much for granted. We're kind of born into these bodies and we're living our life, and there's a lot of things that you just take for granted, like, oh, this is what life is. Just keep going with it and seeing what happens. And I think the idea that we have been given this life, given this birth, and what are we going to do with it, I think is very provocative. It forces us to grapple with the question of our existence and why we're here. We've been talking about this in our program, Remembering Who We Are, that in many ways, death brings a lot of meaning to life. And most of us live our lives, we keep death quite far from us. And so we're just acting and behaving, assuming that we're going to live forever. And then all of a sudden we come upon death's door and we have a lot of questions about how we've lived our lives and the choices that we've made. And so I think the idea of being more aware of what we've been given and this opportunity that we have is actually keeping that idea of death much closer to us and realizing this is not going to last forever. And I do have this opportunity to impact a lot of people, the lives around me, to serve people that I've been so fortunate to have come into contact with. Otherwise, we could just go on assuming that this will continue and being unaware of how precious the opportunity we have is.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. In Eastern wisdom, it's said that those who are wise keep death always close. That then really shapes how we view our life and how we utilize each moment. Of course, the popular expression in the Western world is live each day like it's your last, although that gets confused with let me go out and enjoy as much as possible, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. But then you also have the Ernest Becker approach. Ernest Becker wrote The Denial of Death, and he really uncovers how every fear and everything that we need to work on is correlated to this one thing, death. And the problem is we don't even look at it. We don't acknowledge it. We shove it under the rug. And we may even say, yeah, I'm not really afraid of death. But that's not true. We haven't gone there enough to be able to even determine whether we're afraid of it or not. So I really appreciate the profundity that you brought in with the question of death.
Yeah, thank you.
So when we're wanting to take our lives seriously, and you mentioned about, people not taking their lives seriously and the cost of that, what are some of the things that prevent us? You outlined in your piece a bunch of things that you observed that prevent us from taking our lives with seriousness. Now, there's some nuance here, which you can also speak to, but I was very struck by that section where I saw a connection to the seriousness of our lives and some blockers.
Thank you. So I was writing about this question that I usually ask in the beginning of every coaching session, which is, what would you like to work on? And what I was writing about is, even though I ask that question every time, there are still people who join our coaching sessions not having thought about what they'd like to focus on, or just not knowing what they would like to work on, even after thinking about it. And so I was thinking about this for myself, and I think that can happen for a few different reasons. And I think these are, as you said, there's some nuance here. The reasons why someone might not have an answer to what they would like to work on is often similar to why they might not take their life seriously in the way that we're talking about it right now. And so the first reason why I think this can happen is that the person is just unaware of the areas of their life that need attention. So when you ask them, what would you like to focus on, or what would you like to work on? This kind of goes back to the beginning of our conversation. If you are not sure of the work you want to do on yourself and the goals that you have for yourself, your inner work, and the kind of gaps there, then you haven't really invested in what are the areas of my life that need work, that need attention. And so I think, especially when we're focused on the externals, it's easy to be unaware of what internal areas of my life need attention. The other thing I mentioned is that people may be aware of what those areas are, but they may not understand that that is very much inside the scope of coaching. They may not understand the scope of coaching. And so I think the way this relates to the broader idea of taking your life seriously is, I might be aware of areas of my life that need attention, but I actually don't know who to talk to those about, how to get help in those areas. And so I just sit with that myself. We all need help, whether it's in the form of a coach, or there's so many different types of help we can get on working on ourselves. And I actually don't know who to go to and how to get that help. The third thing that I mentioned was that I've been in this position very much before, where I feel like life is good right now. There's not much that needs work. And I think that the presumption there is, if life is good, that must mean there's nothing substantive to work on, or why rock the boat? And I think our philosophy at Upbuild is, there's always something to work on. We're always trying to elevate our consciousness, become better versions of ourselves. So when life is feeling good, we should feel very fortunate that that's the case, and not sit on our laurels, because there's a short life and a lot of work to do in that life.
And it may not be what it appears. There may be more than meets the eye, because when life is good, well, one, that could be a coping mechanism that I tell myself that. But the other thing is, you were talking about the externals versus the internals. And life doesn't feel good a lot of the time when you're trying to approach the real self, because of what you just said right now, how much work it takes to get there. That's like blood, sweat, and tears, not to intimidate people, not to turn people off, because it's the most meaningful, rewarding, inspiring thing I know, and that anybody else that I admire knows. But it's not easy. It's not like life is good, it's all is dandy, everything's fine. We define this in our workshops, that when we're talking about consciousness, the higher consciousness means I'm seeing all of my lower tendencies and I'm working on them like anything, and they're humbling me like anything. So there is also some attention that's needed when I'm feeling like life is good. I have to ask myself, wait, what's going on here, really?
Yeah. What am I not seeing?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last thing that I had mentioned was in the context of coaching, not actually having taken the time to prepare for that question. And I think, again, the same thing applies to our lives in general. Like, have I taken the time to think about what do I need to work on? Have I taken the time to think about where I'm trying to get to and what's the most urgent need, the most important need in terms of my own work? I think, again, that's easy to fall by the wayside when I have so many other requirements that are on me. So I do all of that work. It might be my job, so many other obligations that I have, maybe with family. So what work do I have to do on myself? Like, that's pretty low on the totem pole of priorities.
Yeah, I found this so helpful the way you laid it out. So it's four things that we need to all look out for to be able to take our lives with great seriousness, is these being the blockers to that. One is that I'm not aware of what I need to work on internally. So, okay, let's shed some light on that. Let's do some introspection. Second is I'm not aware of the need for help or who can help me and what is the context for that. So then that also requires some exploration. The third is I feel pretty good. Things are fine. I'll leave it at that. And the fourth being that we really need to take the time for this, because if we're just do, go, 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 which is definitely how I feel a lot of the time. And I know it's the pace of the modern world today. It's really hard to get in touch with what I need to work on, to prioritize it, and to feel that it's more important than all of the pressing millions of things that keep coming our way.
Yes. Thank you for summarizing those 4 points.
Yeah. So, how do we then get to this place of taking our lives seriously? You wrote about an ideal mindset. Can you share with us?
Yeah. Well, that ideal mindset was really inspired by you. And I was trying to describe your mindset when it comes to coaching.
I feel very shy right now.
Yeah. Well, I think you didn't ask me that question expecting me to appreciate you specifically, but I think that that's really where that was coming from. And the point that I was making is there are people who know what they want to work on, and there are people who don't. And that's a distinction. At Upbuild, we hope to always not only know what we each need to work on and what we want to work on, but also make sure all of the people that we're working with in our community have clarity on what they want to work on and actually how they're going about doing it. So I started with that distinction, and then I put you in a sort of category all by yourself, because I think that the way that you approach coaching is, I would say, pretty distinct from anybody that I've had the privilege of working with. And to me, what I've experienced from you is you put such a high bar and a high priority on this work, not only on your work on yourself, but on the opportunity to make progress through a partnership, a coaching partnership. When I think that you come into a coaching session knowing exactly what it is that you would like to focus on. I mean, sometimes there's multiple things and you're trying to navigate which one, but you're always aware of the work that you need to be doing on yourself and that you want to be doing. And I also seen your anticipation being so high. You walk into the coaching session wondering what nugget will emerge for me that will literally transform my life. And that sets a really high expectation that many people would say, "What? Why would you do that? Aren't you setting yourself up for disappointment?" And what I've seen repeatedly is you are able to see things that many others might miss because of this heightened looking for, first of all, trust that my life is going to change from each coaching session, and then looking for that, and then committing to the actions that are coming out of that work together. So that mindset was, to me, so unique and so distinctive and so beneficial. I wanted to try to capture that for others.
I'm very honored and humbled. Thank you. Yeah, you use this expression, expect miracles. And I hear my guru, Satchidananda Swami, saying that a lot, expect miracles. I've also encountered this premise from Soren Kierkegaard early on in my journey in 2006, which then led me to monastic life and the work of Upbuild. And the idea from Kierkegaard is really to expect the unexpected, come in with a certain frame of mind, mindset that will open up new possibilities. And you describe that a bit in the piece. And it's intoxicating to think about going in with that kind of expectation all the time. It's also very intimidating because it's easy to get let down. So, my question is, why should we expect miracles and not just go the more reliable route of under promise and over deliver?
Yeah, I agree with you. In fact, I think it's probably more intimidating than intoxicating, although I feel the intoxication of it myself, because our expectations affect our experience of our lives. Not just our experience, but they affect our lives. So it's not a free strategy to under promise and over deliver. There is a real cost to that. And we often don't recognize that cost because it's like, well, if I set my expectations really low and don't expect anything, then I can always exceed that. And so the question is, if miracles are up at the top of this vertical scale and setting the lowest expectations possible are at the bottom, you can sort of operate by just constantly exceeding the low expectations and then feeling like, okay, well, I'm happy because I'm exceeding those expectations. But on the scale of what's possible, you may still be farthest away from your potential. So our expectations do have a huge impact on our experience. And we can see this in various realms that I've experienced myself. And so how do we live our lives with greater expectations for what's possible and do that in a way without feeling entitled to those expectations? The idea of expecting miracles, what I've seen, I think, over and over again, is the people who expect miracles, somehow they invite those miracles into their lives. And if we have really low expectations, that's also what we're inviting into our lives.
Yeah, seek and ye shall find. If you don't seek it, you will never find it. It doesn't just happen like that. But setting the bar very low means we may reach it, but that's all we will reach. We will never go beyond. And I mean, even in material terms, you see, forget about the inner work for a moment, but athletes and people that accomplish great feats, they're always pushing themselves above and beyond. And that spirit is needed to excel in anything. And it's absolutely needed for the most important, most difficult work of uncovering the real self. So there's no question about it. And of course, setting the bar also has to be reasonable and one step at a time. And we'll come to that in a moment. And I do, in some ways, like to underpromise and overdeliver in that context, but always with my eye on what is possible, what's the potential. And again, there's another expression that comes to mind: shoot for the stars, you'll at least end up in the sky, But if you don't shoot for the stars, you won't even go in that direction.
Yeah, yeah. It's so funny. I was thinking about that same phrase. I've heard it as shoot for the moon and you'll end up among the stars, but you have to aim really high. And even if you don't hit the mark exactly, you will end up in a different realm than if you shoot for 10 feet above you.
Yeah. So what is our next bite-sized step? What can we do to help take our lives more seriously and get closer to the beauty of the real self and our best experience of life?
I think that the idea that to expect miracles and really envision my life of what's possible can be very overwhelming. And it can also be intimidating, as you said. So to me, it's very similar to how we approach all of this work in coaching, which is, what is my next step? The idea of like working on myself without knowing where to start is very, very overwhelming. And if I can start by identifying what is one area of my life that I would like to grow in internally, that may be about relationships that I have and how I'm showing up in those relationships. It may be areas of my life where I don't feel like I am living with complete integrity or alignment about who I am. I'm showing up with a mask on, trying to be someone that I think other people want me to be. For most of us, if we do this work, we'll find many, many rocks that we have to look underneath. But starting with what's one that is quite present for me. And even there, that alone, just bringing awareness to this is something that I know is true for me that I would like to work on, I think can be the most helpful thing in taking this large challenge and making it smaller. And to me, the way that you can start to expect miracles is when we take something and then we start to work on it one baby step at a time and we start to see progress, it gives us a lot more confidence that, wow, we're able to change ourselves with some attention, intention, work, and it starts to kind of build momentum. And then to fast forward, it can go from intimidation to intoxication because we get intoxicated by progress and progress on ourselves. What could be greater?
Beautiful. So we want to take our lives with maximum seriousness. We want to expect miracles in that process and start with one thing that we can work on in that direction and keep that work going and see what's the next thing and what's the next thing, what's the next thing. And before we know it, there will be transformation, hopefully that is marked, that is visible at least to us, or at least to other people, if not to us. Sometimes it works like that. But yeah, I feel very encouraged and inspired. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hari Prasad. Thank you for asking all your questions and being so invested in what I shared and how it's impacted you.
My great pleasure. Thank you, Vipin. Thank you to everyone listening. All the very best.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Upbuilding the Self. Upbuild is a leadership development company that offers workshops, coaching, and other services to help you on the path towards being your best self, free from the shackles of the ego. To learn more about our work, visit our website, upbuild.com, and sign up for our newsletter to gain access to podcasts, reflections, and upcoming events. If you enjoyed this episode, please go to iTunes to leave us a review so that others can find and benefit from the podcast. We look forward to being with you again next time.